All right, we are standing in a wetland. We've moved from the forest ecosystem over here a little bit north of Solon, Iowa, to a wetland site. This has got a water table that's about at the soil surface, so it's saturated, not really flooded. There will be a few spots maybe where there will be some standing water. I would call this a sedge meadow or a kind of a seep area. The name of the site is the Melinda Rife Riley Prairie and Fen, although I don't really think it's a fen. But we're here to look at wetland plants, so let's focus on that. And we got several of them around us here that we haven't talked about yet on any of the other sites. So let's start with a tall one right here that's sticking up right here. Many tall spikes here of little purplish flowers, tiny little flowers. And many of those spikes sticking up there at the top of the plant. The leaves are very lanceolate, opposite. So here's a couple of opposite leaves here, narrow, lance shape, really strong teeth. This is blue vervain, Verbena hastata. Good example of a sedge meadow, wet seep. It's got some kind of level of slight flooding, not very much. Tall plant, blue vervain. Right below it here is boneset, Eupatorium perfoliatum. Small little flowers here, they're not really very open. A good characteristic for this species, though, in the term perfoliatum, the species name, are the leaves, which are perfoliate. Perfoliate means that, if we look at these lower leaves here, two opposite leaves, but the leaves are actually joined at their bases, so that in a sense the stem comes through the joined leaves. That's what perfoliate means. So Eupatorium perfoliatum, boneset. This is again a good wetland species in sedge meadows, shallow marshes. All right, and let's see. Let's take a look at this one right here. I'll just snatch this one up so we can see a little bit better. This one is American bugleweed. This is in the mint family. Clusters of flowers in the axils of the leaves here. So again, where the leaves are joining the stem, at that point, there's little groups of flowers, little clusters of little white flowers. That's a characteristic of mints. The way the flowers are arranged. It also has a square stem, like many mints do. You can feel the square stem here and rotate it here. There's four sides to it. But unlike many mints, it does not really have much of a minty smell to it. So this is again American bugleweed, Lycopus americanus. There's 4 species of Lycopus that we can put into in Iowa. This one is the most distinctive of those 4 species because of the leaves having really large, these the lower leaves, having these really large and obvious teeth. Almost to the point we'd call this almost a lobe down here. These larger ones down here are getting to the size where we would call that a small lobe. The other species of Lycopus have much reduced teeth, or no teeth at all. All right, so again, Lycopus americanus, American bugleweed. And then another one right here in front of me is this one. This is aster called flat-topped aster. And true to its name, it's going to have inflorescence here that is formed by branches coming up from lower down, but all these branches essentially kind of all end. The branches higher up are shorter, branches lower down are longer, but by doing that, most of the flowers are arranged at the same elevation or height right here. And again, that kind of makes a flat-topped flower structure there. So flat-top aster, or the old name was Aster umbelatus. Now it's Doringia umbellata. Flat-top aster. We moved into a little bit damper portion of this sedge meadow seep, as I think what I'll call it. We're kind of on a gentle side slope here. We've moved down slope a little bit. There's a little bit of standing water in some of the lower depressions we're in here. And because we got a little more water, as the water table is closer to the surface, we've got arrowhead now. You see a big stand of Sagittaria, or arrowhead, growing here amongst us. The very distinctive plant, of course, is one of the easiest ones to learn to genus because of the usually very distinctive leaves. There's several species of Sagittaria, though, of course, in Iowa. They don't all have the arrowhead-shaped leaf, but 3 or 4 species do. And so for those 3 or 4 species, it is pretty easy to distinguish the genus here, Sagittaria. But that's as far as we can take it and be sure of what species we've got. We don't have any flowers or fruits, at least none that we've seen yet. And we need those to pin down which species of arrowhead instead. So we'll have to just call it arrowhead species, Sagittaria species. But right here we have a plant that we can get down to species. This one is called sneezeweed, and its characteristic, I'll just break off a branch here so we can see what I'm going to refer to here is the wings, which extend down from the base of the leaf. Here's a leaf, and down at the base of the leaf, going down the stem, there's a little wing structure or tissue attached to the stem. And that occurs all up and down these branches and stems. So sneezeweed is Helenium autumnale. Autumnale refers to, of course, the time of flowering, or the phenology. We have flower buds just beginning to form here. They're a little ways off yet. This is in the Asteraceae family, or the aster/sunflower family. So it'll have a flower that has both ray flowers and disc flowers. Sneezeweed, Helenium autumnale. Again, the wings are dead giveaway. And then another mint. We saw a mint earlier, just a little bit earlier. Here's another real common mint in wet prairies or sedge meadows, seeps. This is a mountain mint, a species of mountain mint. Pycnanthemum is the genus. To be sure which species, I'm going to have to look at the stem with a hand lens. And what I'm looking for is a pattern of hairs. So on this one, I'm seeing the hairs are on the corners of the stem. So again, this is a mint and has a square stem, like most mints often do. The stem's square, that means it has corners. On those corners are where we see the hairs. On the faces of the stem, in between the corners, there are no hairs. That makes this Pycnanthemum virginianum, or the Virginia mountain mint, which is probably the most common of the 3 species that we have, is probably the most widespread in the state. The other 2 species, narrow leaf or slender mountain mint, would not have any hairs anywhere on the stem. And then the other species, hairy mountain mint, which is a species, well, both slender and hairy are a little bit more southern Iowa. That one has hairs on all parts of the stem. So it's really just a matter of determining how much of the stem is hairy to distinguish which of the three species of mountain mint we have. Now, how do we know it's a mountain mint? You might ask. Well, again, that's kind of a gestalt thing for me. The slender stems, opposite leaves. Um, there's usually some branching coming out of the axils of these leaves. The bigger leaves here, you can see, are opposite. And then small clusters of small, kind of whitish, lavender colored flowers at the top of the plant here. And the smell. So you can often smell any of the mountain mint species, and especially Virginia mountain mint, especially is true. As soon as you just walk into an area where there's a population and just even start walking in amongst the plants, that will often, as you walk on the plants or brush up against them, often release some of the volatile chemicals that are produced in the leaves, and you'll right away smell that very pleasant mint smell that Virginia mountain mint has. One that's useful for making tea. Here's a wonderful large clump of spotted Joe Pye weed, a good wetland species that is found in sedge meadows on the margins of fens. Usually, again, not in real deep water, but saturated or just shallowly flooded. The Joe Pye weeds, this is the genus, at least the former genus is Eupatorium, so it's in the same genus as the boneset we saw earlier. And remember, the boneset had two leaves that were opposite and joined at the base. This one has four leaves in a whorl. So kind of like the bedstraws in that it has whorled leaves. But usually always has four leaves. Let's see, all of these look like four. Maybe a few threes, a few places. And then the spotted name comes from the stem, usually having at least some spots on it, kind of purplish spots. Let's see, here we can see on this stem some spottedness through there. That helps to separate it, although Habitat does this as well, but this helps to separate it from Joe Pye weed, called purple Joe Pye weed, that we could find in a forest environment. It would look very much like this, except it would not have the spots on the stem. It'd have purplish, some purple coloration at the nodes. But this one again gets the Habitat. It's right for it, and we do see spots on the stem here. Spotted Joe Pye weed. Eupatorium maculatum is the old name. The new name is something like Euotrichum maculatum. I found the sedge has got some Perigynia still present. There are a few species, and especially the wetland sedges, as opposed to some of the sedges we've seen in the forests, which have already dispersed their fruits. Many of the wetland sedges hang on to their fruits much later, longer, and also actually flower later. So it's more likely you're going to find sedges that still have the Perigynia present when you're in a wetland, such as we have right here in front of me. This species right here has two large female spikes with lots of Perigynia. So these little pointy things that you can kind of see in here, those are those structures called Perigynia. Each of those, again, is like a sac-like structure that surrounds a female flower. The female flower produces a fruit. The fruits are now inside of those Perigynia. And again, it's those structures that are so important often in identifying which species of sedge you have. And obviously we have those, and this one we also have the male spike, the remains of it, this little thing right here. So again, in sedges, the plants are called monoecious. Monoecious is the term to describe the situation in which we've got unisexual flowers. So just female flowers here, male flowers used to be right up here, so the two sexes are in separate flowers. But both of the sexes, male and female flowers, are on the same plant. All sedges are that way. So this one, just looking at the shape of the pistillate spike, looking at the shape of the perigynia, how those perigynia have these beaks that are long and slender and pointed, kind of pointy. They kind of stick straight out, so they're spreading. The fact that there's just one male spike up here, that makes me think very strongly that this is porcupine sedge, Carex hystracina, porcupine sedge. And again, the porcupine sedge comes from the spreading perigynia and those long beaks that are kind of pointy and sticky looking and touching. You can feel they kind of are a little bit sharp. So porcupine sedge, Carex hystracina. All right, then I also want to show you, I think this is the first time we've had a plant from this group. A frond here. We should talk about this. This is a fern. So when you deal with ferns, the first thing you should understand about ferns is that what we're looking at here is a leaf. So almost all ferns, when you look at a fern plant, what you're seeing is all leaves. The leaves are coming off of a rhizome. A rhizome is an underground stem, so the stem is below ground and is not visible, and the leaves come off that underground stem, rhizome, and usually some type of clump. So we have a special term then for ferns. We call these individual leaves that make up a fern plant. This is called a frond. So in ferns, you also should, of course, understand and know that these do not produce any flowers. Ferns are in an earlier, a little bit more ancestral division of plants in the plant kingdom. They produce spores rather than seeds. Seed production, which happens in the flowering plants and the conifers, was a big evolutionary step that plants made. Seeds have a lot more ability to withstand difficult environments, stressful environments. Ferns and other plants like ferns, the horsetails, the club mosses, and even mosses, all produce reproductive structures that are called spores. They release usually lots of those spores. The difference between a spore and a seed is a spore is just a single cell. One single cell comprises a spore, whereas a seed is a large group of cells, many thousands of cells that actually make up some different tissues. So ferns produce their spores in two different ways. On the marsh fern, you don't see it here, unfortunately, but on the marsh fern, we would look on the bottom side of the frond, and we might see little brown dots. If we don't have any here. Actually, we do have little dots, but they're not brown yet. No, they're there. I'm looking at what are called sori. The sori are little clusters of structures called sporangia. And again, these clusters of sporangia occur in these little groups, collectively called sori. And on the marsh fern here, there's several of those sori that are found on just even a single one of these little. Now, when they produce spores and the spores mature and those spores are ready to be released, then those sori usually turn brownish in color, and you can see them a lot easier on the undersurface of the frond. But they are there. They're just not ready to release any spores yet. They're just starting to form there, perhaps. So on marsh fern, one of the characteristics is the pinna, which that's what one of these sections of frond is referred to. This is a single pinna here. The tend to have these very distinct sort of comb-like lobes. They're very distinctly, each of these lobes is distinctly separated from the other lobes that are adjacent to it. This is, the scientific name is Thalictris palustris. Here is a species of Indian plantain found. The old name Cacalia, the new name Arnoglossum. This is Arnoglossum plantagineum. The species epithet comes from the leaves that are kind of like plantain leaves, so broad elliptic leaves. Usually has very larger basal leaves, and then as you go up to stem, the leaves get smaller in size here. So this was a leaf that was lower down. And then what we're looking at here are flowers that are soon forming fruits here. Very distinctive fruiting structures here, kind of ribbed with little wings on them. Tuberous Indian plantain, Arnoglossum plantagineum. It also grows in even just mesic prairies, so it's usually not found maybe in sites quite this wet, but there is just a small population here. All right, then the next one we're going to look at is one that is found definitely in wet sites. And there's quite a bit of this around us here. This is an aster called swamp aster. Used to be Aster paniceum. Now it's Symphylltrichum paniceum. And so the thing that catches my eye on this one that tells me which species I have are the leaves that are slightly clasping. So at the base of these leaves here, there's two little lobes, one on either side of the stem, tiny little lobes that kind of clasp or wrap around sort of the stem. That's what clasping means. Two little lobes that extend a little bit around the stem. They're not very big, but just enough there to recognize that there are little clasping leaf bases here. Also, the shape of the leaves, the purplish coloration on the stem here also helps to identify this vegetatively. So again, this is swamp aster, Symphylltrichum paniceum. All right, then we have this herbaceous plant. So there's not a lot right here yet. There's no flowers or fruits on this. We do have opposite leaves here, at least lower down on the plant. Again, this is a gestalt one for me. I recognize it just by the form of the plant here. This is a species of willow herb. Which species I can't say for sure. Epilobium is genus, and I would say that most likely, just based on experience, it's probably Epilobium coloratum. That's probably the most common of the willow herbs you see in a wetland like this. Epilobium, probably coloratum, willow herb. And the fourth one here is a grass. And I can feel right away as I was reaching down in here and looking at some plants, I could feel right away, oh, we've got rice cutgrass here. So earlier today we were in the forest and we saw a species of Leargia called Leargia virginica, whitegrass. And I mentioned that the nodes of Leargia have little downward pointing bristle-like structures. That's again a feature of this plant. There's a node right there at the tip of my thumb. Might be able to see those little bristle-like structures there. I can kind of see them even without my hand lens. Here's another node right here, same thing right down there. But then also along the leaves and the sheath, the lower part of the leaf here is the sheath. I can feel sharp, sort of sandpapery, the term scabrous comes to mind. Feeling there as I rub that. This is called rice cutgrass, Lyrzia oryzoides. Rice cutgrass is a really pretty typical species for a sedge meadow, sort of saturated soil like this. You can easily recognize this as you walk into a population of this. It'll grab at your clothing. The bristles, the kind of bristly downward pointing hairs on the lower part of the sheath. Will grab at your clothing. Might even cut your skin if the skin is exposed. Lyrzia oryzoides, rice cutgrass. All right, we're going to do a couple more species here before we leave the wetland. These are two species that I would say are good characteristic wetland species. First one is this one right here, which is done flowering and is in fruit. Maybe you can tell by the shapes of these fruits here. This is a geum. This is Geum alepicum, yellow avens. So geums have these really large bristly fruits. As you can see here, the styles of the individual flowers here are bristles that actually have a little twist in them at the end and kind of form a little hook. These are going to hook into fur and get dispersed. Yellow avens, Geum alepicum. And right behind it here is a species of smartweed. Persicaria is the genus now, used to be Polygonum. This one is really distinctive though as smartweeds go. Let me break off a little bit of it here. So most of the smartweeds do have really small, either white or rose-colored flowers, but vegetatively, look at this one here. So it has leaves that are called sagittate, have these lobes that extend off the base of the leaf there. That leaf base shape is called sagittate, like Sagittaria, although the lobes aren't nearly as big, of course. But also, and this is something that might be hard to see, but boy, you can really feel it. There are just tons of little bristles, sharp little bristles on the stems here. This is really sharp. And you could, again, probably cut your skin if you're not careful here. So the combination of these really downward pointing sharp bristles on the stem, the sagittate base on these leaves, and then the typical smartweed flowers, which are just really small, in this case white colored flowers. This is, again, used to be Polygonum, now it's Persicaria, Persicaria sagittaria. Terethum is the common name for it.